Beautiful day, huh? We even got a little rain this week, so I felt good. Everything kind of sparkled and rose. So we're going to talk today about building a foundation. So we'll get out our pickaxes and our hard hats and ready to shovel some concrete. Yeah, this is a working talk. No, I'm just kidding. We've been talking last week, we talked about our resurrection consciousness, about living in the consciousness of the risen mind, about already being in that consciousness of good. And we've been talking over the last few weeks and actually the last couple of months about how to build our good and experience it more fully in our lives. And so we've talked about naming our good, identifying what is it, what is our good. It really helps to know where you're going, right? You know, I think there's a path that says if you have no goal, anywhere is just fine. And so it's really helpful to know what is my good, what is the direction that I'm going to go, what is it that I want to have showing up in my life. You know, if you sit there and just go, oh, hey, I'll take anything, well, anything is available, and so, you know, you might get that, but it might not be what you're wanting. So naming of the good is the very first step. And then we've talked about the fact that as soon as we name our good, we come up with and become aware of the false beliefs that stand in the way of our good. And so it's kicking those out with the process of denial that we talked about a few weeks back, and then affirming the true beliefs, affirming what's true in our lives. Okay? And so that's kind of some of the ground that we've covered. But Jesus, when he healed somebody, would never say to them, you know what, your naming your good, your affirmations, and your denials have saved you. I didn't see that passage in the Bible. Did anybody else? No? No? Okay, just a second. Are we awake today? So he always says, your faith has saved you, right? Your faith has saved you. And that faith is what is our foundation that we have to stand on. That faith is that firmness in mind that Emma Curtis Hopkins was talking about in our reading. And so, and I love how she puts this, the firmness in mind or good, because good is her name for God. Our good is our God. That firmness being the power, it does not make the good come out right. It makes us see the good in its true light. In other words, our good is already present. Our good is already present. Our health is already present. Our love is already present. Our wealth is already present. Our creativity, our wisdom, all of that is already present. But we oftentimes don't see it because we have other stuff blocking the way. We haven't gotten to that consciousness yet. A friend of mine talks about going hiking with a friend of hers, and he was in a trail going up an uphill trail a little bit ahead of her, and he comes up and he says, wow, what a fabulous lake, beautiful alpine lake. And she's sitting going, what lake? I don't see a lake, because she's about 10 feet behind him and hasn't crested the point of the trail where she can see the lake. Okay? So our consciousness needs to be firm in order to be able to see our good, in order to see the good that already is present for us. We don't have to make the good happen. We're not creating anything. You know, if you plant a seed, you know, you don't make the flower grow. Diana just planted some tomatoes in my backyard. I can't make a tomato grow. Can anybody here? No? All we can do is provide fertile soil and water and keep the weeds out and the bugs off, so it will grow, but it grows on its own. It grows naturally. So what we're looking to see is to see the good in its true light. And all is good in reality is what Emma says. If we have the power to see things in reality, we see the good. But most of us are seeing through a glass darkly. Jesus had a saying that says something about that most of us are walking around in a dream, and most of us are having a nightmare. Okay? And so, can we see things in capital R reality? Can we see things as they truly are? And when we get firm, when we stand in our faith, the substance touches everything. And so as she says in this wonderful example, when we speak the truth to the sick man, he is drawn out into the sight, into that sight of good as well. He is exposed as alive. When we know the truth of ourselves, we're exposed as God in form. Because guess what? That's who we are. We're God in form. So faith is the power that does that. So what is faith? Ernest Holmes says the pure faith is spiritual conviction. It is the acquiescence of the mind, the embodiment of an idea and the acceptance of a concept. So let's break that down. Spiritual conviction. Not spiritual hope, not spiritual, wouldn't it be nice if, but conviction. Okay? That means we totally get it. That's that full embodiment of an idea, but that takes something interesting, the acquiescence of the mind. To acquiesce means to literally become quiet, but it means to open up and receive. It means to, in a way, surrender into the reality that already is. So if we're surrendering, if good is all there is, we start to surrender into our good, we start to stop the mental chatter that goes blah, 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 this can't happen, this can't be, I can't, it's not the right time, the stars aren't aligned, Mercury's in retrograde again. Mercury's always in retrograde, isn't it? It seems like it. And so, that chatter that says, why we can't have this and why this can't be. We acquiesce to what really is. We see the reality that already exists. We accept that concept. We accept that. We embody the idea. So if I want the idea of health in my life, I begin to open my mind to become quiet to the health that already exists, the life energy that already flows through the universe. It's already there. We don't have to make life happen. It's already here. It's already happening. But I have to become open to it happening in, through, and as me. I have to quiet the mind. I have to open and surrender to that idea of allowing that to happen. And then I have to be so firm and so standing in that I embody it and that I have that spiritual conviction in this truth. Ernest also says faith is a mental attitude so inwardly embodied that the mind can no longer deny it. Faith is complete when it is both a conscious and subjective acceptance. So I have to know this not as a pretty idea in my mind. Gosh, yes, I know that God is all there is, and all is good, and all is, but where we subjectively accept it. And that's sometimes the harder part, isn't it? That's where the stuff gets in the way, the old belief systems we have get in the way and say, yeah, but what about? Yeah, but this time it didn't work, and all that stuff. And so we have to move from not just the conscious acceptance of it, but also into the subjective, the subconscious, the full embodiment of it, the full acceptance of that idea. Because we go back to that old phrase that we don't have any secret thoughts, they show up as our lives. Okay? And so those secret thoughts are the ones that live in our subjective level. We want to have the right religious science answer. If I say, what do you believe in? Well, I believe in God, and it's all health and like that. But until we subjectively embody that and truly take that in and believe it, we still don't get that result. Years and years ago, I caught myself praying for more money in my life. I was having money issues, which was a common thing back then. And one day as I was praying, I was meditating before I was praying. I was getting my mind quiet. And all of a sudden I realized that I was praying as a poor person praying for money. I saw myself as a person who was poor, praying to get some money. Now, as long as I've identified myself as poor, as long as that was my subjective belief about myself, was I ever really going to have any money? I mean, I could manifest a little in my life here and there, and I think I told the story that every time I started praying for money in those days, I'd have my friends would get a bunch of money. They liked it when I prayed for money. But it didn't turn my consciousness around until I turned my own belief about myself and what I was around. If we believe in ourselves as sick, if we believe in ourselves as living in a universe that is against us, in a conspiracy against us instead of in a conspiracy for our good, we're going to believe and act out and experience those beliefs until we start to change them. So talking about faith, we all have 100% faith. We hear all the time, increase your faith, build your faith. And I'm going to go against that. I'm going to propose the radical idea that you already have, and I already have, all the faith we're ever going to have. We already have 100% of all the faith we're ever going to have. The challenge is, where am I aiming that faith? What do I have faith in? And is it really consistently fully on? Or am I kind of doing a 60-40 split? Like, I 60% believe in health, but I 40% believe in sickness. Okay? And when we do, we get a split result, don't we? Thank you. Okay. I know it's 9 o'clock, and I know it's early, but some of you have had some caffeine. So we want to aim our faith because we can direct our faith. We direct our faith consciously. And where we direct it will expose what we have faith in. Our lives will expose what we have faith in. If you want to know what you have faith in, just look at your life. Don't judge, don't criticize, don't beat yourself up. Just notice. And then you can shift it. And so we start to ask, do I have greater faith in sickness or in health? Do I have greater faith in prosperity or in lack? Do I have greater faith in creativity or lack of creativity? Do I have greater faith in life getting better or getting worse? Where is my faith? Where am I 100% committed in faith in the direction that I want to go? Ernest says, in order to have faith, we must have a conviction that all is well. That's the starting point. When we recognize we live in a universe that is in a conspiracy for our good, when we recognize that God is good, just good, just good. Out beyond ideas of right thinking and wrong thinking, there's a field. It is in that field that God is good. We start to operate in a universe in which there is infinite love, infinite good, and we recognize that that's all there is, and that that's what we're living in. It starts to shift what we have faith in. In order to have faith, we must have the conviction that all is well. In order to keep faith, we must allow nothing to enter our thought which will weaken this condition. The more that we can get, and the more that we can open up and experience, and this is why, this teaching, I was on a radio interview yesterday on KKRN, and we were talking about a little bit about different religions and different ideas, and one of the things that we do in this teaching is that we inspire people. We ask you to have a direct experience with the divine. Not to read what somebody a couple thousand years ago said about it and try and follow those teachings, but to have our own direct experience with the One. Because that's what builds our faith. That's where we have, and we get it, that we are living in a universe of complete good. Not because somebody said so, a Jesus or a Buddha or a Muhammad or whoever, a Lao Tzu, thousands of years ago, but because we have a direct right now experience of it. And once we touch that, it shifts us forever. Some people get that when they have a near-death experience and they come back and they say, wow, I really got the beautiful love and order of the universe. Some people have it through mystical visions, through meditation, or even not meditation, just they're out doing something, all of a sudden, kaboom, they have a mystical vision. And we get the idea that there is something way beyond just this human life that is so fantastic and so good, and we're part of it. We live in it. We're expressing it. We're playing in it. Okay? And so that's why the invitation to do the spiritual practice, to take that time to meditate, to take that time to pray, to take that time to align your mind with the infinite presence of God. Because as we do that, we start to get that, and then we get unshakable faith. We get to keep the faith. Not just have it, but keep it. So we can't get more faith, but we can generate more faith in the direction we want to go. We can also, now that we know how to do this, weaken the faith of the direction we don't want to go. So if I have faith in where I don't want to go, the first thing I want to work on is starting to poke holes in that structure, right? Bring it to implode that building, right? If I build a structure that I don't want, I want to implode it. And the way that we do that is we start to question it. It's healthy to know how we build our faith and belief in the first place. And so how most of us have created, how all of us basically have created our ideas of how the world is and what we have faith in is this process that starts off with an event happens. Something happens. Okay, just something happens. We then form a belief about what that means. We add meaning to it. We add significance to it. We say, well, that means this. And therefore, that means this about me and about the world. So if Paul is right here looking at me kind of with a puzzled look, I'm saying, I can interpret that as a puzzled look, by the way. That's my interpretation. I have drawn a conclusion. Now, Paul is just looking at me. He may be sitting there going, this is the smartest thing I've ever heard. But I can sit there and say, God, he looks really confused, and maybe I'm not getting it, you know? It's all that's happening in my head, right? And so we have these things, and so much of this was formed when we're less than 8 years old. How good is the decision-making process of a less than 8-year-old child? Not so good, thank you. You know, I have right now, we have a foster baby who's just turned 5 months old, and you know, occasionally, you know, he lays and cries and he doesn't get picked up immediately. I'm sitting there already going, okay, so is he forming abandonment issues already and betrayal issues already, and you know, all this stuff, you know, it's like what's going on in that little mind, you know, how is that going to affect him, you know, 40 years down the road? You know, I can't get what I want. You know, even when I cry and scream, I still can't get what I want. You know, and so we draw these conclusions, we assign meaning, and then we go looking for further evidence to support the meaning that we've assigned to it. So for instance, if I think that I'm just playing with Paul here, that if I think that Paul is looking puzzled, I go out here and look for other puzzled looks. Oh my God, they're all puzzled, because all I can see is puzzled looks, because I'm ignoring the ones of you who are sitting here going, oh wow, this is really cool, you know? I don't see that. And so that's the thing, is we gather the evidence that supports our idea, we ignore the evidence that doesn't support our idea. You ever talk to somebody and tell them how wonderful they are, and they say, oh no, not me. You did a great job with that? Oh, it was nothing. Anybody could have done that. Okay? That's because we have formed beliefs, and we won't let in the evidence that says you really are wonderful. Ever tried to love somebody who just wouldn't let you love them? It's because they formed a belief that they can't be loved for whatever reasons they have. And so we form these beliefs, and this is what gets in the way of us seeing that capital R reality that Emma talks about when she talks about faith here. In most cases, this process is a healthy process. You know, we want to be accurate in our perception of the world. It's good to be able to not have to think every time we walk across the street, what are those large objects that are moving back and forth on the street? Do they have any relationship to me whatsoever? It's good to know instead, those are called cars, and if one of them hits me, it's going to hurt a lot. Okay? We don't want to have to reinvent the wheel every time. But some of those conclusions, when they get in our way, the ones we formed about what they mean about us, stop us from living the fullest and most expansive life we can, stop us from seeing that good that is already there. I was talking with somebody just recently that said, and this discussion that early mankind, early humankind, when they were first living in caves and stuff like that, they leave the cave going looking for breakfast. And the mind would do two things. Number one, it would focus on what it wanted for breakfast, but it would also focus on not being somebody else's breakfast or something else's breakfast. Which one had the most energy, do you think, attached to it? The survival, the not being something else's breakfast. Okay? And so we tend, as a species, to look for the danger, to look for the problem, the what's wrong, and that comes first before the what's for breakfast. Now these days we can walk out looking for breakfast and we don't really have to worry too much about what's going to eat us. We've kind of tamed that down quite a bit. We still have that wiring for looking for the danger in all of life. What's going wrong? Just watch the media. What's going wrong? What can cause the downfall of our planet? The planet has been coming to an end for like thousands of years. You know that, right? I mean, it's in the Bible. It was about to come to an end right then. Dennis Whaley, who's a motivational speaker, carries around a wonderful newspaper that says, "We're all about to go dark, whale blubber running out." 1880s London Times. And all this stuff. I mean, catastrophe has been right on the edge of us, for in some people's consciousness forever. How many times we predicted that the end of the world and Jesus was coming? How many of those predictions have we heard? And yet, I've noticed that nobody's been raptured up, I think, so far. So, and none of that's happened. But we look for that. We look for that. We live in that fear. What the faith is, what the path of faith is to say, you know what? I'm going past that fear. I'm trusting that I live in the universe that is for my good. And I'm naming that good and going for it. Emma tells us that between our good thoughts and the world of reality, which is the good world, is our line of false thinking, which reports ugly things to our mind. Between where I am now and being able to see and live in my good, my promised land, is a line of my thinking that reports ugly things to the mind. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about the Exodus story. And they arrived at the promised land, the edge of the promised land, and Moses sent some people in to go check it out. And of those people, most of them came back and said, there are giants, there's massive armies, there's all this horrible stuff. 2 of them came back and said, there's beautiful grapes and fruit, and it's wonderful, man, you should see it. We got to move in right away. That was the consciousness we could see the reality of what was in the land. The consciousness of fear that reported ugly things was the consciousness that then caused the Israelites to have to wander around in the desert for 40 years until that consciousness died off. And so we have to allow that consciousness to die off. We have to get rid of it because we can't move into our good while we're still believing in these false gods, in these ugly things, as Emma calls it. So we begin to undo our false faith by introducing questions. Questions like, is this really true? One of my favorite questions is this true of God? Does God have a creativity problem? Lack of creativity? No, I mean, look around, right? Does God have a wealth or prosperity problem in any way? No? God have a health problem? Is God sick? No. Does God have a love problem? Is God feeling unloved and lonely? No. None of that stuff. As one of my teachers used to say, if it isn't true of God, it's not true of me. As it was put, if it ain't true of God, it ain't true of me. It's a great question to ask when we're considering something. When something is bugging our mind, it's like, wait a minute, time out. Is this true of God? And if I'm one of God, if it's not true of God, it is not true of me. If I feel like I can't, if I'm too scared to move forward, is God scared to move forward? Does God ever feel like it can't do something? Have we ever seen any evidence? Yeah. Well, I'd love there to be some light out there, but I don't think I can do that, man. That was the first chapter of Genesis, right? Yeah. No, it just says, let there be. And this is who we are. We are that in form. So we start to shine the light of capital T truth on these false beliefs and start to let them dissolve and fall apart on their own. Or as Holmes calls it, vanishing back into the nothingness from which they came. The no-thingness from which they came. So we get a choice if we can either believe with the world or we can believe with God in that capital T truth, that capital T reality. We can make the choice between one or the other of those. You know, Jesus said, I am in the world but not of the world. And what he was talking about was his consciousness, his mentality. You know, the news will convince you that the world, again, is on the edge of collapse and disaster and everybody hates everybody and is killing everybody off. But if you step back from that and turn that off for a little while and start to look around at what's going on, there's people being kind to each other. Have you noticed? You probably encountered a couple of them when you walked in today. You know, and you probably encounter a couple of them when you leave, later on in your day. We can believe with the world, or we can believe with God. Emma says if there's a turmoil in our lives, it is a signal that we are trying to believe in both good and evil at the same time, and it can't be done. If you come to a place where you're stuck, you ask yourself, what is the evil? And the evil is just simply living backwards, living in reverse of the way we want to go. It's not this big, horrible fire and brimstone thing. It's just living out of alignment with the one. Where am I living out of alignment with the one? And where can I move into being in alignment with that one? And so that starts to aim our faith. Her affirmation is, she says, I do not believe in a mixture of good and evil. I believe only in good. How's that for a powerful stance? Let's try it again. How is that for a powerful stance? Let's say that together. I do not believe in a mixture of good and evil. I believe only in good. Take a breath, breathe that in. What this does is it aims our faith in the direction we want to go. It starts to aim us and move us. This faith, this beautiful, powerful, creative tool that we have, it aims us in the direction we want to go and starts to undo the part that doesn't believe that. There's that wonderful centurion story in the Bible who he asked Jesus to heal his son, and Jesus, I forget what he asks him, but basically he says, Lord, I believe, help me with my unbelief. He gets it. He wants to believe, and there's a part of him that does believe, and he's also aware that there's a part of him that's still stuck in not believing, and he says, help me get rid of that part. Because he knows if he can get 100% into alignment, miracles can happen. Great stuff can happen. And so that's what we do. Our small mind eventually acquiesces to the larger truth. We open up to new experiences, we open up to new possibilities, and we start to build conviction in that truth as we see results. Because faith is a foundation that we can build. As we have more of it, and as we experience results from using it more and more, we gain more and more faith that it works. It's very simple. I used to keep a journal of everything that I prayed for. And when it would manifest, I would jot that down. Because I had a massive amount of doubt when I first came into this teaching. This crap doesn't work. What is this? Okay? That was the part of my mind that was doing that. Fortunately, another part of my mind said, I'm going to walk this talk, and I'm going to prove this, that it does work. Okay? And so after about a year and a half, and after about a journal and a half of results from my prayers, it was really hard for that part of my mind that says this stuff doesn't work, in the face of massive evidence that it was working just fine, to continue to have any logical place to stand. Okay? And so we build that conviction with that truth as we see results. And so our mind will, as Emma says, our mind will certainly demonstrate as much greatness as it has courage to stand by its intention. Our mind will demonstrate as much greatness as we have courage to stand by our intention. And history is filled with people who stood by their intention. The Wright brothers. What happens if they would have quit after the first couple times they crashed their plane? Okay. They would not have discovered flight. I'm sure somebody would have eventually, but they wouldn't have. Henry Ford with the V8 engine. He said to his engineers, I want a V8 engine. His engineers said that you can't possibly do that. It's impossible. And he says, no, I've seen it in my mind. I know it's possible. They said, you don't understand. You're not an engineer. And he says, that's a good thing. Because I know it's possible. Edison, something like 10,000 attempts before he got it right on the light bulb. How many of us would keep on going for 10,000 times? That's called standing by your intention. He knew it was possible, and he wouldn't stop. Gandhi, a free India without firing a shot. How many revolutions had ever taken place without firing a shot? Or other forms of violence? Not many. But he had this picture in his mind, and he stood by it. And he had his ups and downs. Martin Luther King, JFK with the space program, all these people stood by their intentions. Will we stand by our intentions? When we say with what we want, when we name our good, will we stand by it? And the final idea, and this kind of introduces it, is the idea of consistency. So we don't go on and off, on and off, on and off with our conviction. We stand in our conviction. If we feel confident one moment that all will come out right, just because a little appearance of the better shows up, and then our heart sinks in the next moment because a bad appearance sets in, we are unstable and we are judging by appearances. There's a wonderful song from Eddie Watkins that says, I walk by faith and not by sight. I don't necessarily look at the appearances of what's going on. I stand in and look at and know the truth. And I stand in that conviction. If Edison had quit based on the appearances, we might still be doing candlelight for our services here, only candlelight, or burning yak fat or whatever it is. So we stand in that consistency. We become anchored in our faith no matter what the outer appearance is. We become anchored in our faith. We have faith in God and we have the faith of God. So when we say, let there be, we know that there is. When we say, let there be, we know that it's happening. Are you willing to go there? So faith means to be firm, a firmament, a firm mind, mental. We keep knowing what we know is the truth until it shows up. Mark talks about, a story from Jesus in Mark talks about, such is the kingdom of God. And the kingdom of God is just simply the reality of how it works, okay? The kingdom of God, as a man who casts seed into the ground, and he sleeps and rises up night and day, and the soul springs up and grows, and the seed springs up and grows while he is not aware of it. For the earth causes it to yield fruit, and yet first it must become a blade of grass, then an ear, and at last a full grain in the ear. It's a beautiful teaching, several beautiful teachings in that phrase, in that parable. First of all, we cast the seed. We name our good. We hopefully cast it into fertile soil. We cleanse the soil if we need to. That's our consciousness. Okay? But once we plant it, we let go of it. The last step of our spiritual mind treatment, our 5-step prayer process, is called release. I let it go. I let the universe work on it because, as it says here, it's the earth that causes the plant to grow. It's not us. It's not us. See, Edison didn't invite the light bulb because he willed it. He kept tapping into that infinite presence of himself. He had a method of sitting listening to ideas, and he would get into a basically sort of a trance state, an altered state. He held a rock in his hand so in case he fell asleep, and put a bucket underneath it. In case he fell asleep, the rock would fall out of his hand into the bucket and wake him up. Okay? But he hung on just at that edge because he knew that at that edge, not at the edge of striving and trying and making it happen, but at that edge was the idea of creativity. Okay? At that state where we tap into something greater than just our mind. And so we stand in that faith until that happens. And then we allow the process to happen. It shows up first as a blade of grass, which looks like nothing. We're planting wheat or corn, and all of a sudden we see a blade that looks like a blade of grass, and we sit there and go, that's not what I wanted. We have to give it time to go all the way. Okay? And so that's why we don't judge by the early appearances. If we looked at a tulip coming up, the first thing that comes up is not the tulip, right? The flower, it's the leaf, the little shoots. If we look at that and say, no, I wanted a red tulip, and I got this little green thing here and cut it off, are we ever going to have a tulip? No, because it doesn't work that way. So we stand in our faith and we allow it. We have faith that's such that we don't need to be aware of it. In other words, we don't need to keep on working it. Ours is to sow seed and water. Sowing is naming our good. Weeding is denials, clearing the soil. And affirmations is our water and our nutrition. The growth process is natural. So this week, what I want to invite you to do is 3 things. Number 1, take one of your seeds. Some of you have been kind of working with this process for a little while. Take one of your seeds. Especially one maybe that you're having a little struggle with. Anybody have something that kind of earlier in the year you named your good on and it's kind of a wrestling match right now and you're having a little trouble with it? Anybody besides me? Okay. Take that seed. This is what Emma says. Take one of the toughest things. Okay? And begin to clear the weeds and water it. Clearing the weeds is, where do I not believe rightly for it to manifest? Where am I out of line? Where am I aiming my faith in the opposite direction from where I want to go? Where do I have a greater belief in it not working out than I do in it working out? And start to undo that part. Start to unravel that part. Start to create denial. Start to ask questions. Start to dismantle the faith, that particular building of faith, the faith that is not going to work out, and start strengthening and building the faith in the direction that I do want it to go. So I start to then build affirmations. I start to remember statements of truth. I start to do my spiritual practice. I start to read things that feed my mind, that allow me to remember the capital T truth of where it is that I want to go. And then finally, that was number 2. And finally, number 3 is stand firm in your faith. Don't judge it by little fits and starts. Don't judge it by little fits and starts. If you've set a good in motion, if you've named a good and claimed it, it is yours already. You can't name something that's not yours already. And so all you need to do is get rid of the stuff that says you can't have that out of your mind and out of your consciousness. And you'll watch that seed grow, not because you make it grow, but because it is natural for it to grow. It is natural for you to be healthy, wealthy, happy, prosperous, creative, having all that life that works out. That's our natural life. Take a breath. I'm going to close with a quote from Ernest Holmes. If one will have faith, he gives 4 places to have faith in. If one will have faith in himself, in his fellow man, in the universe, and in God, that faith will light the place in which he finds himself. And by the light of this faith, he will be able to see that all is good. And that light shed by this faith will light the way for others. We become conscious of the darkness only when we are without faith. For faith is ever the light of our day and the light on our way, making that way clearly visible to us, even when to all others it may be beset with obstacles and the ongoing rough. So when we stand in that faith, we shed a light. We shed a light that makes that way clear and possible for us. So my invitation for you this week is to stand firmly in that faith, to recognize the good that already exists and the good that is yours, and the good that and the invitation of the universe that it wants you to be living as that good here and now. Taking that on? Okay, let's pray. So I know that there is one presence, one infinite, beyond all the names, one infinite presence, one pure love, one pure good. So far beyond our even concept of it, way beyond our wildest imaginations. And we are one of that. We are already one of that. Any good we can name. I love the story of the prodigal son where the second son asked for his inheritance, an inheritance that by rights he shouldn't have even had, and the universe says, yes. We can ask for whatever. Something that even the ongoing race mind around us doesn't believe in. But because we are one of the infinite, it says the only thing it ever says, and that is yes. And so I speak my word that each of us opens up to a good that is greater than we have ever imagined. We allow it to be planted in soil that is beautiful and fertile. We take out any weeds. We strengthen it with affirmations. And we stand firmly in the foundation of faith. That foundation that allows this seed to grow and manifest fully in our lives into the full blossoming, the full ear, the full grain in the ear. And we don't stop until we get that. We don't stop until we experience that. And so this faith within us, which we already have 100% of, I speak my word that each of us aims that faith more fully, more clearly than ever before in the direction that we have chosen to go, in the highest and greatest good that we can ever experience and imagine, and then beyond. And for this I'm grateful. For each person who does this, knowing that that good blesses each person and then blesses out beyond each person, I'm so grateful for the infinite presence that it moves in, through, and as it all. That is the actual growth. It is the actual good. I am ever so grateful. And so I release this word into that and plant it in that soil, knowing this word manifests itself. So each of us is living a life that is greater than everything else we have ever lived. Anything else we have ever lived. And it is done because we say it is, and we agree on it. And together we say, and so it is. Thank you.